Hello everyone, my name is Peyton Oxley, and this video is going to be all about the tear-jerking teen drama film known as A Silent Voice by Kyoto Animation. Coming out in 2016, this Japanese animated film's sole purpose was to evoke an emotional response from audiences all around the world, as the topics the movie covered were all very sensitive. After people had watched this touching masterpiece, they had reacted just as intended. It was hard not to when the entire movie was about children having suicidal thoughts and experiencing the social anxieties they had growing up. That is exactly what you can expect from this video. If you are unable to handle the uncomfortable topics of suicide and bullying, please turn away now. I'm going to go over these topics explicitly, as well as mental illness within the characters of the movie as they experience these anxieties throughout high school. So let's get right into it. When this movie was created, it held the golden rule as the main takeaway from the entire film. Treating others how you want to be treated is something to keep in mind as you watch this movie, because it is the exact reason why the main character made such a stark change from a mean bully to being bullied himself. At the beginning of the movie, it introduces the characters and how they interact with one another. That being said, it also immediately introduces their flaws, like the main character being a bully. Ishida, the antagonist as well as the protagonist, made it his entire 6th grade goal to bully the new student named Shoko, all because she was unable to hear. He would write mean things in her notebooks, shout in her sensitive ears, and would damage and throw her expensive hearing aids out of the school windows. During all of this, Shoko had done nothing but apologize because she had thought everything was her fault. Everyone around her had bullied her in some type of way, except for one person. She ended up getting bullied herself and was forced to move to another school. One day, when Shoko didn't show up for school, the principal had confronted the classroom on the bullying that had been going on. Before Ishida got the chance to admit to his wrongdoings, everyone had called him out on it. When he had tried to defend himself by accusing the others of doing the same to Shoko, none of the teachers believed him and he was punished. As a result of this, his old friends had started to bully him for even trying to out them.
え
西宮さん大丈夫？どうしよう。西宮さん。
お前やりすぎ。
あーマジムカつくあのクソメガネ何どいて邪魔この人何やってんの帰ろうぜ嘘つけ文句あんなら言えよはあ話せよキモいんだけど
西宮さん面白い。
将来赤くなってんじゃん。
なってねえわ行こうぜ
マジかよ西宮さん。
これはやばいな。
うわ
This was a crucial part to the storyline, as it provided the importance of the golden rule because of how Ishida was able to realize the torment that Shoko went through. He didn't want to get treated in such a way, but he had treated her horribly for something she had no control over. This concept in itself is something that is a lot more common than you may think. Situations like these, where bullying can happen out of nothing and out of something, is very frequent in schools these days. Unfortunately, children with disabilities are even more subjected to this behavior, as some kids at that age are unable to comprehend what disabilities are like and what they can do to a person. Statistically speaking, children with disabilities are more likely to get bullied among their peers despite certain types of bullying being considered harassment. While there are supposed to be protections against bullying like this, teachers and parents can't stop what they are unable to see. Moving on into the future, 5 years later, we see a more grown-up Ishida in high school. It introduces him in a more mature light, and it shows a calendar marking the days as they go by towards an unknown end goal. He quit his part-time job, withdrew all the money he owned, and sold all of his personal belongings. These were all red flags and cause for concern as he left all of his earnings in an envelope by his mother's bed. He then walks along a high bridge where he envisions jumping off. Luckily, he doesn't actually do it, but the thought was there, and that is cause enough for worry. Ishida had made a plan to commit suicide in a way that he figured would not bother anyone, as he paid back his mother for everything that she had done for him. Another case of suicidal thoughts and attempts is when further down the line, Shoko had also tried to end her life by jumping off of her balcony. Ishida had barely made it in time to save her, but was able to pull her back up. However, this resulted in him risking his own life, and he fell trying to save her. Luckily, they were both fine, but the guilt Shoko felt was immense, and she thought that her being alive was a nuisance to those around her. These cases of suicidal tendencies are surprisingly very common in today's world, especially in Japan. Japan has one of the highest suicide rates in all of the majorly developed countries. In just 2019, Japan had the second highest suicide rate among all of these nations, and this entire concept is why it is considered a very big social issue. Many Japanese films, like A Silent Voice, have no problem discussing these sensitive topics because of how common they are. It is important for them to talk about these things and raise awareness in order to try and prevent these rates from increasing any further. Furthermore, it is shown that Ishida was not at all popular at school due to his old friends sabotaging his relationship with people before they had even started. This is what caused him to develop social anxiety and depression, as he refused to look at people in the face and instead imagined them with X's over their faces. He used this as a coping mechanism, as he would get physically ill from having to look at people in the face due to his mental illness. When he met Shoko again after all those years, he never saw her as someone he needed to hide from, despite being so ashamed of how he treated her in the past. He slowly started to open up to people when he made his first friend, who treated him like anyone else, named Nagatsuka. As he talked to the closest people around him, the X's slowly started to fall off one by one. However, his anxieties would come back when he felt as though his friends had betrayed him, and the X's would slide right back up to their faces. Many teenagers these days often use different coping mechanisms in order to get through their days. As anxiety and depression is found to be much more common amongst children these days, it's important to understand where they stem from and what they find comfort in so that they can feel safe. I think A Silent Voice was able to portray this kind of mental illness beautifully, as it wasn't too graphic or panic-inducing. Another way that Ishida had a way of coping was pretending as though he couldn't hear all of the people that were talking about him. He found that it was easier to carry on when he was unable to know what people were saying about him. I think this was also a way to pay homage to Shoko and how she couldn't hear, but she was still such a sweet person. In a way, it felt like he was trying to put himself in her shoes. At the end of the film, you can see that Ishida takes his hands off of his ears, and he finds that he doesn't seem to mind all of the noise of the people around him. He doesn't care what they're saying anymore because he has friends around him that he loves and feels stronger because of it. You can even see how the X's around everyone's faces have completely slipped off, and with it, he feels lighter, and his realization of all of the life around him makes him extremely emotional. Another takeaway I got from this was that Ishida was able to see all of the life around him and how important each life is. This is most likely to do with his experience with suicidal thoughts and how he almost lost Shoko. I see it as though all of the X's coming off of their faces was him realizing that every life is important and that they are all worth listening to, even if he might feel a little overstimulated by all of the noise around him. His experience had made him stronger as a person and helped him overcome his anxieties. Finally, one of the main reasons why A Silent Voice had overwhelmingly succeeded was because of how each of the characters had such interesting dynamics. None of them were boring, they all had a life of their own. They all had flaws, good qualities, and different emotions that just helped push the story forward. Of course, Ishida had the most character development as he experienced so many things to help warrant his change. He grew up essentially. He worked hard on himself so that he could be worthy enough of apologizing to Shoko. He learned sign language for her. He kept her ruined, waterlogged book all of those years just so he could give it back to her when he was ready. He didn't cut any corners. He wanted to become someone his mother would be proud of because ultimately his mother was one of the main reasons why he had even changed in the first place. Shoko, of course, had forgiven him once he had apologized because she had always been that way. She was always way too kind for her own good, but she recognized how hard he had worked, and she was grateful for it despite being scared at first. Even Shoko had major character development as she went from blaming herself for everyone's misfortunes to understanding that she was important and that she deserved happiness too. Overall, A Silent Voice was a beautiful movie with many different messages and interpretations. Never forget that there is always someone out there to help you no matter what. Please get help if you need it. Never be scared. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.